Welcome back to Fox 32 News coverage of the Chicago mayoral election. I'm political editor Mike Flannery.
And I'm Natalie Bomke, and we have some breaking news. Paul Vallas is going to advance to the April runoff.
The AP is projecting that Vallas will be one of the top 2 vote getters tonight. Let's go right to those numbers. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Brandon Johnson is looking increasingly more and more likely to be in the runoff against Paul Vallas. But first, let's get to Dane Placco at Vallas headquarters.
Yeah, it is absolutely packed here tonight at Vallas headquarters at the City Hall, a restaurant in the Fulton Market neighborhood. Probably 400 people packed in here tonight. Music is playing loud, a lot of excitement in the crowd. And I want to bring in, if I can, 2nd Ward Alderman Brian Hopkins, who endorsed Paul Vallas as part of the campaign. Brian, what's your reaction to the 15-point lead at this point?
Well, the reason I endorsed him is because his message for public safety resonated in my ward. There was no question that crime is the #1 issue on Chicago's voters' minds right now. And Paul Vallas, from the early stages of this campaign, owned that issue. He spoke to it clearly, he spoke to it passionately, and he gave very specific ideas about what we need to do to turn around the increase in crime. I really think that's the reason that he ran away with this tonight out of a strong field of 9 contenders.
Ran away, you think?
Absolutely ran away. There's no question about it. We've known for a couple of weeks that he was almost certainly in the runoff. But for him to finish as strong as he did, with such distance between him and the 2nd and 3rd place contenders, there's no other way to interpret that. It's the voters saying they agree crime is the #1 issue right now.
And not to put the cart before the horse, but Mike Flannery was just saying that it's looking more and more like Brandon Johnson is going to secure the #2 position for the general election. How do you handicap that race?
Yeah, it does appear that Brandon Johnson will be the opponent right now. I think Mayor Lightfoot might not be mathematically eliminated, but that's a pretty big gap between 2nd and 3rd right now. So you've got 2 candidates in the runoff with Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson that have very different ideas about what we need to do to turn the crime statistics around in the city of Chicago. I think we're going to have a very robust debate, but Paul Vallas has been leading on that issue since this campaign started, and he's going to keep his message consistent, and he's going to stay exactly in the lane that got him here in the first place.
And you think he'll be able to fundraise dollar for dollar with Brandon Johnson, who of course can tap the Chicago Teachers Union?
Yeah, exactly. The Chicago Teachers Union put millions into that campaign. I think Brandon Johnson will have to look at additional sources. He can't be a candidate funded by one entity in the runoff. That won't work. So I don't know where he's going to go for additional funding. But I do know Paul Vallas' vote total tonight came from every part of the city, the south side, the west side, and the north side. He has a very broad base to draw from, and I think you'll see a very broad fundraising effort on his behalf in the coming days.
All right. Thank you, 2nd Ward Alderman Brian Hopkins. By the way, congratulations on your re-election tonight.
Thanks. My opponent just called to concede.
Yeah, so. You didn't have an opponent,
right.
So there you go. All right. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks.
So that's the scene here at Vallas headquarters. We're hearing that he's going to be heading over here fairly soon. We were told earlier in the day that he would likely, if he had a comfortable lead, make some sort of appearance shortly after 9 o'clock tonight, and that would appear to be certainly within the realm of possibility with that 15-point lead right now. Back to you.
All right, Dane, thank you very much. And let me elaborate a bit on why I say that it looks increasingly, Natalie, like Paul Vallas is going to face the Teachers Union organizer and Cook County Commissioner Brandon Johnson in that April 4th runoff. Right now, with about 17,500 votes separating Brandon Johnson, he's leading Lori Lightfoot by that margin. There are something over 100,000 votes still out, perhaps. If he continues to get his 20%, Lori Lightfoot's going to need to get about 33% of the remaining votes. And stranger things have happened. I guess it's possible. It does not seem very likely. Now, the almost universally recognized front runner in this mayoral campaign for the last few weeks has been Paul Vallas. He told me last night he was ready to move forward and head out on deal with things in the runoff. Let's now go to the Brandon Johnson campaign. Elizabeth Matthews is there. They've got to be feeling pretty good about the catbird seat they're sitting in right now, Elizabeth.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement here on the west side, Mike. That's for sure. The music is playing. The food buffet just opened up. A lot of people, though, while there's a party atmosphere, there's a lot of this, right? A lot of looking at your phone, checking that scoreboard right now. Like you said, it's still about 20%. But it's been a busy day for Brandon Johnson, Cook County Commissioner, former educator, former CTU organizer. When I talked to his communications director about an hour ago, he said he would be arriving around 8 o'clock, so he might be in the building. He had about 8 stops during the day. He was able to make his daughter's Black History Month program this morning, so he was excited about that. We got him voting earlier this morning with his wife here on the west side at a Chicago Housing Authority apartment complex. So we got that out of the way, and then he had a bunch of polling sites that he went to and had some meet and greets. But I said, how you feeling? And while confident, the communications director did say, we're still nervous. We're still nervous. Although I wonder if that's changed at all right now. I want to bring in, hi there, we want to bring in City Council member Pat Dowell. How are you feeling? Describe this atmosphere.
Electric. It's a great night so far.
And are you surprised by the numbers? Are you surprised by how fast we're seeing these numbers?
No, I'm not surprised. I mean, I think Brandon ran an excellent race. His message resonated with people. He knows how to talk from the heart to people. He's very quick thinking, and he has ideas that I think people resonate with. You know, investing in people, solving our crime issues. I'm excited about tonight.
How much does the teachers union and supporting teachers and his history with teachers, how much does that resonate with voters?
I think the fact that he was a teacher helped him to be able to explain his position to just the common person. I think secondly, the fact that he has also been in a legislative body and knows how to make legislation and knows how to work with people who have to vote on his legislation is an excellent talent to have.
We don't want to jump the gun, but based on the numbers, this could be a runoff between him and Mr. Paul Vallas. How do you feel about that runoff?
Well, I think this is going to be a very tough race. You know, I'm sure that the same kinds of oppositional attacks that were made on Brandon Johnson in this race will be made in the runoff. So we'll be prepared for that. A lot of it isn't true. So we have to make sure that Brandon gets his message out the way he wants to get it out to all of the people of Chicago.
Does he have the support? Does he have the cash?
I think after tonight he'll be able to raise more money. You know, obviously money is the fuel to anybody's successful campaign, and I think that we'll be able to raise the money for him.
Do you think he's going to a runoff? We still have, 25% of the vote to come in. We still have 100,000 mail-in ballots. Do you feel like this is going to a runoff for him?
Well, you know, like I said, the numbers don't lie, and so far he is ahead, and I hope that he maintains that position, and if he does, he will be in the runoff.
Pat Dowell, appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, go enjoy the party. All right, so that's what's going on here on the west side of the Brandon Johnson campaign. Like I said, we do think that he's probably in the building. He wanted to, after all of those pit stops throughout the day, we were told that he wanted to spend some time with his family. He's got 3 kids, he's got a wife, so he kind of wanted to regroup, take care of the kiddos. We do expect to maybe see them here later today, later tonight, but we do probably think he's in the building and he's watching these numbers come in, just like we are, live on the west side. Elizabeth Matthews, Fox 32.
Elizabeth, that was a great interview with the 3rd Ward Council member Pat Dowell there. As you undoubtedly know, she is a former member of Lori Lightfoot's inner circle. Lightfoot put her in charge of one of the most powerful committees in the city council. And a few weeks ago, when Pat Dowell endorsed Brandon Johnson, it was a huge blow to the Lori Lightfoot campaign, and it sent tectonic shockwaves through City Hall. People were flabbergasted, and not only did she endorse Brandon Johnson against Lightfoot, who she'd been working with and been a member of the inner circle, as I said, in the council, one of the most reliable aldermen. She took some real shots at Lori Lightfoot for being combative, argumentative, picking fights she didn't need to fight, being not cooperative even with close allies. huge, huge blow.
Well, and certainly that resonated with the voters as well, right? That's why we're seeing, the incumbent mayor in the third position here, which you said earlier historically has really never happened before.
Precedent. It's utterly without precedent.
So we're talking about if we have Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson, two starkly different candidates, and one of the issues that each of them have different varying viewpoints on is how to manage the police.
Yes, and Brandon Johnson, you've seen Lori Lightfoot running those commercials, quoting Brandon Johnson with him saying that he favors, he says, defunding is not just metaphorical, defunding the police. It's a real, actual goal. We're going to see the battle fought there. Mm-hmm. We're going to see Paul Vallas going after Johnson based on the $800 million to $2 billion, depending on how you're counting, in tax increases he's proposed. We're going to see Johnson, I think, go after Vallas on some of those social media posts the mayor has objected to. It's going to be 5 weeks, April 4th, 5 weeks from tonight is when the runoff election, we count the votes in that election. It's going to be a hell of a campaign.
And speaking of the campaign, let's talk about campaign funding, because that's a big, big issue. Willie Wilson, I believe, though, had the most campaign funding in this particular race, correct?
He was self-funding. He's a multimillionaire, self-made businessman.
He was not at the top of the heap. And we know that Brandon Johnson primarily funded by the teachers union. Who's primarily funding Paul Vallas, and are they going to be able to keep that level of funding up heading into the runoff?
So while Brandon Johnson still drawing a salary, a pretty good salary from the teachers union as an organizer, that'll be part of the issue. I think Paul Vallas's source of money will be made an issue by the Johnson campaign. And again, this all assumes that Lori Lightfoot doesn't come from behind. She'd have to, if we take a look at these numbers, we might just clarify it as we're talking about all this. That Vallas right now has about 35%, 154,000 votes almost. Brandon Johnson at 89,000 votes. He's about 17,000 votes ahead of Lori Lightfoot. The problem for the mayor is that as more and more votes come in, and she's not closing that gap there, she's going to need, if Johnson continues to get about 20%, she's going to need about 33 or 35% of the outstanding votes in order to make up that gap. It seems very unlikely. But to your point, Natalie, about the kind of rock'em sock'em rollicking campaign that the city of Chicago is in for, here's my advice to voters. Make some extra popcorn, lay in some extra pop, and maybe an adult beverage or two for those who are of age. Check those IDs and sit back. It's going to be a heck of a 5 weeks. It'll
be very interesting. 87% of the votes are in at this point. How shocked were you to see Lightfoot this far down, and even Congressman Chuy Garcia? Because remember, even before he announced, people were saying, "Oh, if he announces, he's certainly going to win this race." That's
right. He was the front runner. I mean, you're seeing Lightfoot and Garcia in third and fourth place there. Fight it out. It's a bit reminiscent, I have to say, of the campaign, of the U.S. Senate campaign a few years ago, in which there was a guy worth about $600 or $700 million named Hull running against Dan Hines, and they spent the entire campaign running negative attack ads and firing at each other. And a guy named Barack Obama went right up the middle.
Yes.
And when we counted the votes like this, it turned out that this relatively little-known state senator from the Hyde Park Kenwood neighborhood had gotten 52% of the vote. Mr. Hull and Mr. Hines had fallen by the wayside, having shot each other.
Yeah, and then we also talked a lot about the pre-election polling. That's all we had to go on for so many weeks. And really, it appeared to be right on the money.
Yes, particularly I think we have to give some credit to Matt Podgorski, who's been a frequent guest on my Flannery Fired Up program on the weekends. Podgorski was the first pollster 15, 16 months ago to post numbers indicating that Mayor Lightfoot was in the kind of trouble we're seeing tonight. And then a few weeks ago, he was the first one to have Vallas in the 30s. He had Vallas at 33%. Right now, Vallas is getting, of course, 35%. It's interesting that the mayor dismissed Mr. Podgorski as some dude from the Northwest Side. Well, the dude abideth.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that interesting? I don't know. We've heard language like that from her before.
Yeah, we have.
Dismissing people that might be of note.
I think it's worth noting, though, that, look, it's been a very tough time to be the mayor, to be the governor, to be in charge of big cities anywhere. The mayor had to deal with COVID. That devastated the downtown, the economy. Downtown still hasn't recovered. We've got 175,000 workers who still haven't returned downtown, who were there before the pandemic. It crippled the CTA, it crippled Metra, and then, of course, the soaring crime, the demoralization of the police department.
But you have to wonder, and I'm sure this is so true, those were pivotal moments, and the choices that she made had to have played into how tonight shook out.
Well, it hasn't been easy for mayors anywhere. And certainly Lori Lightfoot, if she is not able to come back and make up this gap, she will have a lot of time to reflect on that. Right now, 35% for Mr. Vallas, Brandon Johnson at 20%, Lori Lightfoot at 16%, Chuy Garcia at 14%.
Okay, so let's say that I'm a person who has my mail-in ballot in hand, and I don't know if the post offices have all closed yet. I'm assuming they have.
It has to be postmarked by tonight.
I know that. Yes, I know that. So let's say that I dropped my ballot, my mail-in ballot, in the mailbox tonight. Will it count? I mean,
well, as long as it arrives, as long as it's postmarked.
But what I mean is, from the results that we're seeing thus far, are any of those mail-in ballots that are yet to be counted actually going to make a difference?
Will they change the result?
Will they change the result?
Theoretically, it's possible. The Chicago Board of Election Commissioners thinks that by the time we're done counting these votes today, that there are going to be 100,000 vote-by-mail ballots still floating around out there. They believe that 60,000 to 80,000 of those votes, of those vote-by-mail ballots, will be returned by March 14th. So, right now, Lori Lightfoot is trailing Brandon Johnson, as you look at those numbers, by 17,000 votes. There are 60,000 to 80,000 vote-by-mail ballots still out there. So theoretically, mathematically, it's possible. You know, the Bulls have not yet been mathematically eliminated from the postseason in the NBA. It's theoretically possible that they could be world champions by the time it's over. Is it likely? Not likely.
So what kind of information are voters going to hear more about each of the candidates? Like, are we going to hear maybe some additional things that we haven't heard thus far in the campaign about the two runoff candidates that could maybe sway us one way or the other? Or is all the information pretty much already out there?
Well, I think to some degree, a lot of the negatives are out there. The mayor was certainly spending some money in recent weeks going after Brandon Johnson, not quite as fiercely as she had gone after Chuy Garcia earlier. I think everybody agreed that Vallas was getting into the runoff, so the battle, it was this three-way contest among Brandon Johnson, Lightfoot, and Garcia. So she was shooting at those other two. Look, this is going to be an intensely ideological campaign. Brandon Johnson is the only, he will not commit to filling the police vacancies. That's a centerpiece of Paul Vallas's campaign. Brandon Johnson says he wants to spend money hiring mental health experts and psychologists who would respond to 911 calls and who would, he says, help to reduce the number. There were tens of thousands, 30 or 35,000 911 calls of assaults in progress that didn't get a response. And Johnson says, that these 911 psychologists and social workers, they would respond and reduce that number. We'll see if he makes that case or not.
So we've got a lot more results to talk about tonight. Of course, we're going to continue to talk about the mayor's race. That is the pot of gold. But we're also going to talk about some of these aldermanic races as well. Lots
of new faces in the city council. We already have some of them appear to have won. We know the names of some of the new faces. There are also going to be a passel of runoffs. We have a lot to talk about, so stick with us, and we're going to be back. We're going to go live at 9 p.m.
News at 9. That's right. We'll have all your latest results. But make sure you also follow us online, fox32chicago.com.
All right. Thank you for watching us here online. We will see you back on the air for Fox 32 News at 9.